Let's take a look at the turnaround from the previous example. For the recorded excerpt, I used heavy strings tuned down a half step to sound similar to the electric blues artists of the 60s like Buddy Guy or Jimi Hendrix. For this segment, I'll use the acoustic guitar so we can slow down the examples and hear each individual note with clear sound. Remember, these examples are written for the key of B, but will sound as the key of B flat because of the drop tuning. So transcribed as B major, we see a measure as 4 triplets, and each of these is a dyad. In other words, each of these triplets on each beat is a pair of notes that we think of as belonging to the spelling of the chord. A dyad could be the B and the D sharp in this B7 chord, or the B and the F sharp, the B and the A, or any combination of those. So in each of these chords we could see several possible dyads, and there are plenty of dyads that are pairs of notes that reply to different chords. In other words, they belong to different chord spellings and therefore can be used to suggest different chords with a single pair of notes. Let's look at the progression. Here's the B7 chord. As we've said, it has the B, the D sharp, the F sharp, and the A. So on the first triplet we see the F sharp, the D sharp, and back to the F sharp, which sounds... It's a pretty inconsonant interval. We think of it as being this minor third in the middle of the triad, but in fact it's inverted so that the F sharp is the lower of the two notes, and that makes it a major sixth interval. Unlike the next interval, which is a major second, we've taken the B and the A, the dominant seventh interval from this chord, and inverted them. They make quite a harsh sound. The A and the B close together have a distinct grind in the interval. This shifting of colors between consonant intervals like this major sixth and then the major second over here, which is much more dissonant, is part of the actual expression of the blues. Next we come to the G sharp and the D natural. This is a diminished fifth interval. Again, very harsh. This is the interval that occurs between the third of the E7 and its dominant seventh. So if we think of an E chord or an E7, on the top of it, we can think of these two notes as a dyad based off an E7 chord. Here on the fourth beat, we're going to see the E and the C sharp, and really the C sharp is not inside the chord that we think of as being spelled at this moment, but there's a constant shuffle in the background where on the second and the fourth beats of a blues rhythm, the chord is constantly suspending from the fifth to the sixth. Therefore the B inside the E chord raises up to a C sharp on the second and fourth beats. You've heard this many times with the E becoming suspended on the second and fourth beats. So this C sharp is really just a reflection of that. This phrase ends with a D natural and an F sharp resolving to the root of B. Even though we think of D sharp as being the chord that belongs in the B, as we return back to the one chord, it's perfectly alright to use the D natural because it's in some of the other chords, and it's the minor third inside of the B chord. So if we really think of blues as having a constantly shifting dynamic between the major and the minor, we can see that the D sharp and the D are both acceptable thirds. In fact, many blues phrases slur these notes between them. Because there's this constant shifting between the major and the minor tonalities, it's very handy to think of dyads inside of chord spelling so that you'll always have phrases that are correct for the chord that's passing at the moment. We see on the first beat that we have the root, or B, and then the dyad based on D sharp and F sharp simply moves up one fret at a time in a chromatic voice leading. We see this slightly dissonant shape of the minor third just moving up one fret at a time in the division of the triplet before the last pair, which is F sharp and A, becomes part of this F sharp 7 chord and is tremolo picked out to the remaining beats of the measure. Because bluesy progressions tend to shift between major and minor tonalities, a single scale often does not work for the improvisation. Understanding dyads can help you always be correct with the chord going by. So you may want to take each of these shapes that we find and simply address them as being a component of a certain chord, and then realize that the same number of frets it would take to transpose that chord up to a certain other key, you could take the same dyad shape and move it up the same number of frets or down the same number of frets and come up with an equivalent harmony based on another chord. So this pair of notes, the D sharp, the F sharp, and the D sharp, are actually a component of this particular chord along with many other chords. So you may want to go through and look at each of these individual shapes and see them as components of the chord going by, then move the chord itself up to another location and see if you can do the same thing with a dyad and make it respond to that chord. I hope you find these ideas useful. Thanks for tuning in.